Hello and welcome once again to another edition of Spiritism, a closer look, evolution. This is our program number 16. Yes, it is 16. So last week we finished talking a little bit about the evolution of the brain, but we're going to wrap it up today with a very, very, very special guest, Vanessa Anseloni. She's coming on board with us. I'm just going to start real quick before she joins us with, as we always do, with the spirit trivia of last week. So this was our question last week. Which publication brings a detailed spiritist view of the brain? And we had all these options: Genesis by Allan Kardec, In the Greater World by Spirit André Luiz, On the Way to the Light by Spirit Emmanuel, Leon Denis with The Big Enigma, and Paul and Stephen by Spirit Emmanuel. And that was an easy one, I believe so. Okay, so the right answer was In the Greater World. Great book. If you've been following us, you know we've been using the book, and especially chapters 3 and 4. But to talk about something like this, we need somebody special. So let's bring her up. Here it is. Vanessa, how are you, Vanessa?
Wonderful. How are you, Luiz? It's great to be here in Spiritism, a closer look. Congratulations for the program. And thank you for bringing us here for this special topic, right?
Well, special and fascinating and challenging. I would say challenging because it's right in the boundary between spirituality and science.
Exactly.
And there are different views from each side. So yeah, you just saw the spirit trivia from last week and pointing to the book In the Greater World.
Yeah.
What can you say about the book? By the way, let me tell the audience, Vanessa Anseloni is the founder of Kardec Radio, right? Right here, Kardec Radio. She is the founder, and she is a neuroscientist and also a psychologist. So she's got a lot of background, a lot of information to share with us here today. Vanessa,
Thank
in
you.
the greater world,
Yeah.
what can we say about
You know, Luiz, for people who are watching us and not acquainted with it, so André Luiz has a series of books.
Mhm.
And he brought it through Chico Xavier and also Valdo Vieira. There are some in which they both like evolution into worlds, as you have been teaching people about it. And specifically about this book, of course, the book is very comprehensive in so many facets. But there are at least, we would say, at least two main chapters here that he talks about the mental house and studying the brain. But if we go to the very preface of this book, Emmanuel tells us the mission of André Luiz. And it's fascinating when he says that. He says, André Luiz's mission is to reveal the treasures that we are happy heirs in eternity, heirs of imperishable riches. Just talking about this, then we are going to understand the importance of this book. Some people, they say, yeah, I've heard about it, I've read it a long time ago, but these are books to study.
to study? Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And as we were talking here before we opened the program, and you said so well, Luiz, this book, for example, In the Greater World, was brought in 1947. At a time in which neuroscience was not even considered a subfield of, the medical biological sciences. Neuroscience is a very young
Yes.
science, and mostly it became a well-established field of science in the 90s
Yeah, it's called
because of the decade
of the brain, right?
Yes. So it's interesting because what André Luiz is talking about here is something that we didn't understand much in sciences, and there are things that are yet to be understood. And if we go to the very chapters, I don't know if you want to go straight to the chapters and we can start extracting things.
Yeah, let's just talk a little bit about what what the book brings in terms of how a neuroscientist reads those two chapters, 3 and 4, and what can you bring to us?
You know what
Spirit.
I think is so interesting, Luis, is when I read a book like this, like if I go to the lab in neuroscience, it's very fragmented. If I study olfaction, the other one studies pain, the other one studies about taste, the other one, and it's very fragmented. And the translational research that will be bringing the basic research, the lab research to the clinical is still very in the baby steps in so many ways. We know many things molecule wise, cellular wise, in terms of our nervous system. But then when it comes to the clinical aspects, there's still a gap. When I read a chapter, like for example, chapter 3 of In the Greater World that talks about the mental house, it's fascinating because we see this translational aspect brought to light. And it's unique because he's gonna talk about like the mentor Calderaro. He's talking about how we think in our daily lives, how we feel, and then he's going to make a correlation about it into the structures of the brain and how the different subsections, let's say this way, will be activated more highly or not according to our emotional choices, for example. So this is, it's still ahead at the
Oh,
vanguard
yeah,
of sciences, right?
absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and for me particularly, when I read, I'm not in the medical field, but it makes it even more challenging. And now I want to know. So it kind of forces me to know a little bit more depending on how you see it, but a little bit more about biology, about the brain itself. It invites us overall to study more of everything. So because we feel like we're so small, and we are actually. And it's incredible the amount of information on that book. It's a great book.
I agree. And it's interesting. There's one sentence when you read it, it's like a dream for all of us on earth, and like either in the healthcare sciences or the clinic to say, let us examine the brain of this person. I mean, as if we could. We can. There is MRI, there is the CT scan, but we already have imaging studies, but not at the level that they are presenting here. So it's very
Uh,
humbling for us.
yeah, it goes way down deep. But Vanessa, in the greater world, it is not really the only book that talks about the evolution of the brain. I got this one here, beautiful evolution in two worlds, and this is another book. It has one full chapter, which is chapter 9. The name of the chapter is Evolution in the Brain, and there's one phrase that was very striking for me at the
Mhm.
time, which is this here: the brain is a microcosm. Wow, that gives you a total different perspective from routine life, daily life. You look at this and you say, "Oh, hold on, this is more serious than what I thought before."
Yeah,
Did you make any comment on that? You know,
sure.
on that?
If we take the word cosm, the root
Mhm.
microcosm, it's talking about a world, a universe in itself.
Right.
So no wonder when we are in the lab, we need microscopes for electrophysiology experiments, for experiments in neuroanatomy, because you really have a universe represented there. And we are talking about, as André Luiz says in that book, Evolution into Worlds, Part 1, Chapter 9. He begins by telling us that we are spirits and our brains, they will relay what we're thinking. So, for those who are watching us, and it's like, I'll make a comment, Luis, because there are people who nowadays come to me and say, Vanessa, do you think that person is bipolar? Do you think that person is depressive? And I say, it doesn't really matter in the sense of you're not defined by what science tells you now, because science doesn't know much to this level. And that's when Spiritism comes and says, you're not defined by your physical brain today, because actually it is receiving the input from the spirit. So even though the brain, and we're talking about spiritual brain, physical brain, the mode, the spiritual brain, receiving this information at human level, which is immense, because when we study the brain, one of the first conclusions is we have so much potential to be developed and we haven't done it yet. So there is really a lot to be unfolded in terms of potentialities. I mean, in this sentence, we could go 10,000 ways, but these are some of the things that come to my mind
Mhm.
based on the studies by Science and Andrea Lewis books as well.
Yeah, and I think when you go to study at length, especially in the medical field, when you have access to labs and researchers and everything else, with the information that we have from books like this or from Spiritism, when you put them together, it gives you a different perspective. It widens the horizon in such a way that the regular clinical or clinical studies will not, because they're very committed to the material field, material level, and it puts us on a completely different. It's actually exhilarating to when you put them both together. It's incredible.
It is.
And of course, uh, current medicine depends a lot on technology, and technology is getting better. It is, and it will help science in general, academic science, to be able to discover more things, to find out more things, to do better researches, to go deeper into things. And yeah, at one point, we're going to converge to a common point. But for now, I think we're still far apart. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, we're getting there, but it's gonna take some time for us to connect the dots, right? And I think that's where Spiritism is always ahead. When people nowadays are suffering, they're feeling limited. Let's say they go to the doctors, for example, COVID-19, which is still happening, and the latest studies show how, in some cases, it impacts the brain. And then people are worried and concerned, and scientists are trying to understand. But we in Spiritism, we already know the end of the story. We already know that I have my thoughts and my feelings, and I'm a co-creator. And today I can redefine my biology. Maybe not overnight, but I can start today my healing process. I don't need to wait for a doctor to give me a pill to start it. I need to start it today. Count on the doctors, but don't limit yourself to it, because Spiritism brings us the understanding that we have full potential and we are using this for as an instrument for our evolution, right?
Yeah. I usually say that cure at the spirit level, of course, the equivalent at the physical body level would be maybe relief. But, medicine will give you some relief. You have a lot of pain, discomfort. Yeah, you will take care of that. That doesn't mean that cure has arrived. Cure does not arrive. It starts from within. Okay, let me. You were just talking about something very interesting, that the spirit is the triggering factor. Everything at the spirit level, the brain responds to what the spirit says. This is an interesting phrase by Andrea Luiz. In every corner of the brain, special cells are under the control of the spirit. Every cell in the brain is under the control of the spirit, simulating its desires and executing its orders. That, right? Simulating its desires and executing its orders, straightforward in the automatism that evolution goes from. That's what you were just saying, right?
Exactly. And I like when he says assimilating its desires. Because in another book, we remember, Luis, Andrea Lewis showed in the book Action and Reaction that we all have a central theme. And we need to know ourselves, as Kardec shows to us in the Spirit's book, right? Question 919. We need to know ourselves to evolve. So I need to know what messages I'm sending to my body, because as he says in this book, Evolutioning to Worlds, chapter 2, is my cells are like little pets, little animals, like pets, like a dog. They respond to our commands, but much of our commands are unconscious. So that's why desires, because it bypasses consciousness. So I need to go within and discover my innermost desires to know if I go to psychosomatics, for example, and then I get to know, uh, for example, I'll say this because there is a scientific paper on this. Back pain, lower back pain, and forgiveness. And then I think, oh, I have back pain, and people think, oh, it's financial issues, etc. What is it? But if we go to science, it already points to a direction. I need to forgive. And then I need to find out, forgive who? Forgive what? I don't know, because we are in the automated. It's already unconscious or subconscious. So I need to go within, find out, because there is a message, vibratory message, that is being sent from me, the mental body, as Andrea Luiz says, to my bodies, the paraspiritual body and the physical body. And it's receiving and it's acting on it. So I don't know. I need to find out. But the body is an instrument for my self discovery too. So we could say that our physical body is a teaching instrument for us, because through its ailments, through its limitations, through its characteristics, we can understand more about ourselves. It doesn't define us, but it points to directions that we need to work in order to evolve.
It's our dashboard
Right? Right?
with all the alerts and problems and trouble. Yeah, it's a
Exactly.
dashboard.
And we can't deny, some people say, no, but I just have a headache. Well, a headache doesn't come. It's already byproduct of something that we
Yeah,
generated, right? So we
absolutely.
need to know ourselves.
This thing is very interesting, and it's pretty clear here. Spirit controls. Cells are under control. And, and he goes even further. He gets into the brain, studies the neurons, and here's another one that I thought it was very interesting. He's talking about the neurons. So the nucleus of the neurons contain a substance that represents psychical nucleus drawn by the spiritual body during physical rest for the renewal of the fatigued and irreplaceable cells. So that means a lot of things. One of them, let me just
Mhm.
call the attention for the audience here. First of all, rest becomes important.
Yeah.
Not because you're tired and you're going to have a hard day tomorrow. No, that's not what we're bringing here. That too, but the main reason why rest becomes important is that's the exchange of psychical. Right? So it's incredible. Like he goes straight to the point. Psychical.
Again, when we think about Descartes was great in so many ways, but scientifically, our society has inherited um, this divide between body and mind. And now science is coming to an understanding that in some ways, even in the paradigm we have, there is no divide because you process your emotions in your brain. We say process. The materialistic scientists will say the brain's generating it, but they can't prove it yet if there is no extracorporeal. So it's still scientifically a hypothesis that cannot be denied. But we can say we are not bodies and minds separated. According to the Spiritist science, we understand that we are extracorporeal beings enveloped by a spiritual body that is connected molecule by molecule, as Kardec says, to the physical body. So it's no surprise the synchronicity. It's so beautiful to see how André Luiz comes much later, in 1958, when Evolution into Worlds came along, pretty much like a century after Kardec's Spirit's book came along. And he develops, he doesn't deny it, he doesn't contradict. Actually, he doesn't contradict, he actually expands our understanding. So it's so connected molecule by molecule that what I feel, what I think, what my mind is, the psyche is going to be imprinted. It's going to be manifested in these beautiful neurons at molecular level, to say the least. When he talks about the nucleus of the neurons, he's talking about these very fine changes that happen in the dynamics of the cells and the connections between the neurons and within the cells. When he talks in the chapter 9 of Evolution into Worlds, he's going to talk about the mitochondria, right, which is the breathing system of the cell. And he brings great details. I know when we study deeply, we still have questions to understand the details of it. But the much that we can understand is every particle of these cells is responding to our mind. So for us who are here living our daily lives and we need to know ourselves again, to know which message we're sending to our physical body. And there is a message, Luiz, that we have to tell to the audience of Cardiac Radio that was already sent lives ago. And it's imprinted in our spiritual body. And now may affect our outcome in the health of the physical body. So sometimes we're going to experience illnesses. And as he uses this name, dystonias, however we want to say it, like these disturbances, not necessarily because of the choices in this life, but because of thoughts, feelings, programs that we created in previous lives too. And our body is going to respond directly to it, right?
Yeah. So what happens in the neurons, for example, here, which is this interaction of two worlds actually in the neuron? It's actually a consequence of. It's the result of our spiritual history. Whatever we did from day one as simply ignorant until a millisecond ago, a nanosecond ago, a picosecond ago, that's what it is. So that's why these things happen in our neurons. Because they're reflecting spiritual history.
Yeah.
And here's another phrase that he's still talking about the nucleus. The nucleus is surrounded by the protoplasm, which contains an ochre pigment that is closely related to the spiritual body and has a highly important function in the life of the thought. So you see, he is telling us here that the thought is not generated in the brain. Substance has to do with the spiritual body and processes the thought. The thought has to do with that. The thought is not generated in the brain. And I think that's what most of the scientists, most of the academic science still think it is, right? That the brain formulates the thought and generates the thought. That's right for the medical.
This is what he calls the factor of fixation, right?
Yeah,
The factor of fixation, as he,
factor of fixation. That's the name they give in the spirit world.
right? And this is like a revelation for us. It's a revelation for us because I have a paragraph here on the book in which he says to us this ochre pigment that in the spiritual world they define as factor fixation, as if to encompass the mind in itself. When the mind distances from the renewal movement in which life is expressed and advances, thickening or thinning it in human circles as the mental attitude of the spirit in the share of time in which it endures their incarnate existence. So, what is beautiful here is that he's giving tips and hints about elements in the physical brain, of course, the perispiritual as the main mode of it, and but then telling us that what we create potentially will manifest, as he says, the mental attitude of the spirit will be manifested through this venue. So now we look at each and every single component of our nervous system at cellular level, at molecular level, and we see it's not there by chance. It's not, even though we may not understand it fully, there is a purpose. And it's always to allow the spirit's mind, the mind of all of us, the spirits, to be easily manifested there. I think this book is so empowering, Luiz, because when Andre Luiz writes this book, he says in the preface, though it's heavy duty science, he says, this book is not for scientists. This book is to bring consolation to the people who are suffering. And we're like, what? Why? Because then I'll appreciate the divine in me, the divine construction in me. And as he talks about the architects, the spirit engineers, the spirit architects, who are in the beyond planning the instrument of the physical body to be an easy instrument to manifest the mind that is evolving, the divine mind in us that is evolving multimillenarily.
To get to the point that we are in terms of a human brain the way it is, it didn't start like this. It wasn't a snap of fingers that the brain just showed up like this. There's a tremendous millions and millions of history, starting all the way down with the pure animals, and this is something interesting. He puts that in the book, The Evolution of the World. In the fish, the cerebral hemispheres are still quite small, but they are already there. That's very interesting. In the amphibians, they display a little bit more development. And in the reptiles, they advance even farther, and that's in the reptiles that the pineal gland shows up. And that's, I think particularly, I think that the advent, let's put it this way, of the pineal gland is a game changer.
Yes.
There's a before and after here.
Yes.
Personally, that's my thought. I don't know what your thoughts are in terms of the advent of pineal gland.
You know, as you said, Luis, I want to reinforce this to the friends who are here with us. It's so precious, this evolution, the evolution through the species, and how the spirit is doing these internships from species to species, kingdom to kingdom. That when we read this book, and I talk to somebody who's thinking of suicide, I say, no, because it took billions of years for you to get here. Billions. It's not only this life. You can't quit because it's too precious. And now I need to open a parenthesis, mostly out of this current state of things in our society, because now the remainder of the pandemic, the aftermath of it all, the escalation in suicide cases, we need to talk about the book Memoirs of a Suicide, where they show in the spiritual realm, in the university, in the City of Hope by Mother Mary, that rescues suicidal spirits and rehabilitates for a next reincarnation. They talk about the preciousness of the building of the physical body for a reincarnation. So it's so precious, it's so important that when we think of suicide, when I see a teenager, I say, oh man, let me tell you about how precious your brain is, how long it took for you to build this with God, because we are co-creators. And you can't quit, because if you do, you're gonna mess it up for hundreds of centuries.
Yeah, and most people don't realize that and unfortunately, and things like suicide happens, and not only that, but diseases that we create unnecessarily that could, it could have been completely different. The outcome of our actions could have been different, and we are in a society that mostly follow the materialistic paradigm, and we kind of go with it because it's the famous everybody does.
Yeah.
Everybody does doesn't mean that it's right. It means that everybody does. That's all it means. It doesn't mean that's right or wrong. But by the way, right or wrong requires a reference. For me to tell you if something is right or wrong, I have to tell you at the same time, well, using this particular reference, you're right or you're wrong.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean that my reference is the absolute reference. The absolute reference is up there. It's only God. So unfortunately, we fall into the praise of the material world and things like suicide, and starts with depression, and it goes worse and worse and worse.
Yes.
And we see all a lot of domination from these inferior spirits, less advanced spirits, discarnated over the population. Unfortunately, we spiritists have the opportunity to have all this immense literature and all types of information coming from all angles. Our information comes from, psychologists, it comes from scientists, it comes from biology, it comes from a lot of different places that you put it all together.
Yeah.
And it only makes sense when you put it all together. You see, you as a neuroscientist, that's when I kind of was getting into what is this thing about neuroscience in the 90s or so. One thing that fascinated me is, let me see if I can put into words. For example, biology, they have their line of study, they have their stuff, it's well defined. We're going to study this and the cells and so on and so forth. And there's a point that the answers don't come because, you hit the wall and, you're just trying to find the answers. They don't come. In parallel, you know, somebody else is doing something else. So psychology is studying this and that and that and that. There's a point where they hit the wall.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a point where all these different branches of academic science, they're going to say, oh, I hit the wall. But hold on, these people in biology, I think they got something going that can help us.
Yeah.
And same, biology hits the wall and they're going to look for these guys in technology. They're doing something that's going to allow me to see the blood better. So at the end, all branches of science had to drop their selfishness and work together. That's how neuroscience became, right? It's a blend of academic studies and sciences all working together. Because when I say I'm better than you are, I don't have my answers, but I'm happy, that shouldn't be. And the beauty of neuroscience is this: it takes a wide range of past studies and sciences and individual academic sciences and puts it all in the blender, and finally we start to get answers.
And I tell you this, I love the brain. I remember my first teacher in neuroanatomy talking about the brain, how for him the brain was bigger than God, which I don't agree, of course. And because he was very materialistic. But then when I came to the US, it was the end of the last years of the decade of the brain. So we had the opportunity of coming together at the meeting where the government was wrapping up the decade of the brain. So uh, the Senator Kennedy, who was one of the main advocates for it, he discarnated already, but he was there. And who was there besides the scientists? There was the Superman, you remember, Christopher Reeves. He came with his wife, and he was already in the wheelchair, but he could speak. But he looked like a doll, like a wax doll, because he couldn't move. He was just talking. And he was one of the greatest advocates for it for obvious reasons. And he has his own foundation. Though they discarnated, the couple discarnated, the foundation is still running. And the legacy remains because we realize the brain is the commander of the body. So we need to understand how it works to make us live better. So recalling each and every one who was giving talks and the discussions, we say, we still need more. And when I see this book by Andrea Luiz, Evolution into Worlds, or even as you said, in the greater world, when he's going to bring this, I would say it's a thesis in translational science in the chapter about the mental house and studying the brain. Because nowhere on earth you're going to find such a refined connection between the areas of the brain, the systems in itself, and how it correlates to the way we think, which is fascinating. Because then if we teach people or we help ourselves and one another to feel differently, to think differently, in the long run of immortality, we're going to master, as he says, Andrea Luiz says, being co-creators at minor level, and then we're going to graduate to being co-creators at major level.
Major level, that's right.
Right?
Yeah. We as we go into the next years, I think at least that's what I have seen and heard. Spirituality and science, or spirituality and medicine, are coming together at the university level. So a little bit, more and more, little by little. Of course, it takes time. It's a big change. You got to understand. It's not only a an educational change. It's a social change. So yeah, it will take time. You will take, people to, some are going to complain, some are not going to agree. So, but it's happening, overall it is happening. So that's positive news. That's good news. And at one point we're going to get to, I would say, I'm not going to say get to the level that Andre Luiz puts us in the book, but at least to the level that triggers us. Oh, let me see what this is. Let me understand a little bit more. Let me read a little bit more. So it's this is coming. I think this is happening.
Yes.
Fortunately, right? Fortunately.
Yes.
Okay. All right, Vanessa. So I think we did cover some pretty interesting subjects here. I think our audience, and always you that if you're following us here, you can always go to cardiacradio.com, make your comments. You can always ask us anything. Just go to the site, and any suggestions, comments, questions, any of those things, you're always welcome. So please participate with us. It's always good to hear from you. And before we close, Vanessa, any final words, any final thoughts that you want to leave to us?
Yes. When you reminded me of these chapters in the book In the Greater World by Andre Luiz, if we go through, and this is a recommendation for all of us, to go to these two chapters when he talks about the mental house
Mm-hmm.
and studying the brain. Because in there, he's going to talk about our daily lives, different types of cases. And he's going to show to us that it's important for us to elevate ourselves. Of all things we can do in this life, we have free will. Our body is going to respond to our deepest desires, to our deepest thoughts and feelings. So we need to elevate ourselves daily. And that's the call that Andre Luiz brings to us. It's worthwhile investing in our future selves, but it starts today. It's worthwhile uh, ennobling our thoughts and feelings, something that is new to us because we tended to be very reactive. We tend to be very instinctive, but we are here to become humans. That's the real journey. To become humans and to be human, we need to reason, to be fully aware of what I do, what I feel, what I think, what I say, no longer being simply in automated mode. When I read those chapters, it's telling us, let's raise ourselves to our highest potential because the brain can accommodate much evolution.
And
If
it's wired for that. We just don't use it all, right?
exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Vanessa. And if you're following us, every end of the program we publish in our Spirit Trivia. So you can always go to evolution.spirittrivia.com. There's a question in there for you to cast your answer related to today's program 16. We once again, we do not collect any email address, any IP address, any information, nothing. We do not collect anything. It's 100% anonymous, but we encourage you to participate with us. You and I and Vanessa, we are all learning. Okay, so participate with us. Thank you very much for joining us, and I'll see you next week. Thank you so much.